And we are live, another edition of Hangout in the Holy Land. You got the whole crew, or at least a lot of the crew, here in the house tonight. Lots of stuff on the table. Big Ten expansion, Maryland and Rutgers official members of the Big Ten. Plenty of speculation about who else could be joining that fray. Plus, it is Hate Week, Ohio State, Michigan, the game. Doesn't get any bigger than that, and we'll have plenty of thoughts on that. I'm Luke Zimmermann. And I'm joined by Brett Ludwiczak, Chris Kopech, Matt Brown, Ted Glover, lots of folks in the house, so we'll skip individual introductions. Let's just dive right in. I think we had a reader reach out to us and ask us what our thoughts were going to be on Maryland and Rutgers. Now, Matt did write some fine things on kind of what Rutgers and Maryland respectively are bringing to the league, but I guess there's still just a matter of our individual opinions, because I'm sure we all have opinions that sway very greatly. I think the conventional wisdom is that this doesn't really add a lot of value to the Big Ten's brand. It kind of waters it down, if anything, in the short term. I'll kind of be a contrarian, as I'm prone to do, and say that I think Rutgers is currently on the up and up in football. I think they may never be there basketball-wise, but they are in a good market to kind of recruit for that kind of talent. I think Rutgers can, especially given how they've recruited in the last year, if they can maintain that cycle. Last year they were 24th in the country, which would have been good enough to be third in the Big Ten. Yeah. They keep recruiting at that clip for 3 or 4 consecutive cycles. They can at least compete in the leaders or the legends or the East or the West or whatever divisional realignment, and we'll get to divisional realignment as well. But I think they can compete. Maryland is kind of a sleeping giant to me because the D.C. area does have good football talent. Their current coaching staff is just a mess. Randy Edsall has just been a huge bomb, and Mike Loxley is a great recruiter in Little Elf, who's a terrible head coach and had all kinds of issues down in New Mexico. But I think they've got some Big Ten money. It might be time for them to get some Big Ten caliber coaching. But we'll start with you, Brett, and just work our way from left to right. Kind of what are your thoughts on the Big Ten expansion, these new additions, and any other thoughts that you have on the subject as a whole?
Well, we get those Under Armour uniforms from Maryland, so that should be pretty painful for the eyes. But I mean, you get the DC market, you get the New York, New Jersey market, which is what the Big Ten Network wanted. Football wise, it's not anything that blows you over like a Texas A&M, Missouri, but it helps the Big Ten grow, and then you can see where it grows from here. It'll be interesting to see if we heard rumors of earlier today, Boston College and Virginia possibly joining. Again, 2 moves that are pretty meh, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you what, I actually kind of like the idea of the direction they're going, not from like a television standpoint and not necessarily from the viewership. They're going to add some TV boxes. That's more money for the schools. It's more money for Big Ten, which is exactly what they wanted. So in that front, they're good. I actually really do kind of like the move for basketball with Maryland, because that D.C. area is still a great basketball recruiting hotbed, and they're going to be able to pull a lot of players out of there. They're going to want to play in the Big Ten now, and I think that's going to be good. And you're right about Rutgers football. I mean, Brett, like you said, it isn't Texas A&M, Missouri. This isn't heaven. This is Piscataway. But Rutgers is on the up and up a little bit, and if they can keep going, they seem to be doing just fine with that Schiano there, chopping that wood. So hopefully they end up moving in the right direction. I actually am pretty excited about the move, and I love the honesty that Maryland brought to the table by saying that we're doing this because we want to bring more varsity sports back. We want to take care of this, and we want to get the money that we think we deserve to run a Division I program. So I'm actually a big fan of it, not even trying to play the contrarian.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm willing to entertain the idea that Rutgers and Maryland can eventually become strong football programs. I think if you going back and looking at what Rutgers has done over the past decade, I can see how you can make the argument that they're on the up and up, but I'm not really sure how heavily to weight their accomplishments in the Big East. Rutgers hasn't beaten a ranked team outside of the conference in 25 years. It certainly hasn't happened recently. Their big wins have come against Louisville and South Florida when they had particularly good years, and their wins all came against each other. I'm willing to entertain the idea that once they get an influx of money, they have a chance to increase their recruiting. That could potentially increase. I don't see Rutgers as being a program that's going to be like Nebraska or Michigan that's going to contend for division titles, but certainly someone who could be like at a Michigan State level. For other sports, it doesn't always seem that great, and the rumors that are coming along for potentially moving to 16 are not programs that really excite anybody either. I can't imagine how any of us are going to feel if we have to watch a Boston College Purdue game in late November, and it ends up being like 11-4. It's just going to be terrible.
Ted, take us home. I know from the site you're not a huge fan of this, so go ahead and just discredit everything we just said. Prove us wrong.
I want to, but I sat and I really listened to what Jim Delaney and Wallace Lowe, I believe the Maryland president, had to say, and it really made sense. The traditionalist in me, the Midwest heritage, the Midwest culture, the Midwest identity, it's gone. I mean, and we just have to accept the 21st century. College athletics is big time business, and I saw a report today that adding Maryland and Rutgers will add potentially $100 million over 10 years just to the two schools. Plus, that's extra money in the coffers of the currently existing Big Ten schools. And that's what it's all about. And Jim Delaney made a good point that all the other conferences in this expansion palooza and realignment and stuff, geography has really become secondary. And Penn State was really in a lot of ways isolated. They had the Big East and they had the ACC around them, and now they've got closer geographic rivals. And I think this is just an opening move to go to 16, and I'm not even sure at this point. Once this expansion train starts again, it's going to stop at 16. I can see it even going bigger than that. I'm not a big fan of it, but I just think we have to accept the reality of the situation that in the 21st century that it is what it is, and we're just going to have to learn to live in a new college football landscape or a college athletic landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. I will go ahead and say that you mentioned Wallace Coe. He absolutely won me over in his spiel. Could you imagine if E. Gordon Gee was president of a university in the same situation? He'd probably get rid of the athletic department. I think he's already done that, actually, at Vanderbilt. Somehow that worked out. But, no, I mean, in all jokes aside, Coe said the right things, did the right things. Today's Rutgers press conference, their incredible young athletic director had some good sells as well. I mean, if you're an AD at 41 or however old he is, you've accomplished something in your young life, certainly probably more than I will if by the same age. But nonetheless, I think that these schools, I've kind of come around on them both after initially kind of having some not being totally sold on them. So, we'll see what they add to the mix. Delaney pointed out, well, these teams could be a lot more competitive just due to the, not only the increased Big Ten recruiting, the increased media exposure, but just the increased resources to help them recruit. If Maryland's on their next coach then, or if, Kyle Flood's kind of built a Northeast juggernaut or something like that, it'll be interesting to see. I think I do agree with you that kind of the momentum has started. I think 14 is kind of the sweet spot for me. I think you can still have some semblance of it feeling like a conference. I saw people complain today that the Big Ten's already losing that because you won't see some teams for 2 or 4 years. If you miss one team or two teams, you're still playing them in basketball, you're still seeing them in other sports, and you're still potentially going to see them in the championship game. So I don't buy that as much for 14. Now, in terms of, 16, it gets dicier, and certainly anything beyond that. I think Gene Smith mentioned he wasn't totally averse to super conferences, which shouldn't surprise anybody. But yeah, we'll have to see what goes from there. I think we all, Brett made some good points about the media markets. That has to be, where the buck begins and potentially ends. The Delaney did make some good points that it's a gamble. You're not going to definitely get Cablevision and Time Warner New York City and these folks on board. It's a calculated risk, and they're going to have to hope that enough alumnus in those cities request the network to where those cable providers have to pay them that $1, $2, whatever the right fee is. I know it's a lot less than ESPN's, like $4 or $6 or whatever absurd amount they get per subscriber. But
I think it's like $1.25, something like that per subscriber.
Yeah, it may actually vary in the home markets, because I think that in Columbus it's like higher than that, like maybe $1.63. But then in markets where it's like there's less pull, like maybe like the middle of Texas or something like that, it's like 50 cents. The Big Ten does. I think they're one of the few networks that has variable rates, which is interesting.
One thing to keep in mind, though, too, is really outside of just a couple programs, whose would be a home run get for Ohio State. You've got maybe Texas, but the Big 12 team's stable. You've got Notre Dame, but they really don't want any part of the conference. And okay, fine. And outside of that, football-wise, who else would match up for the Big Ten academically? Because they still put on this facade of academics being important, and I'm not saying it's not when you get into research and everything else. Who else? I mean, really, I can't think of anybody outside of maybe Oklahoma, but they don't even come close academically in terms of big move the needle names. And so I don't think as this evolves and continues, we're going to see the whoa factor like we did with Nebraska. I don't see it. It's all going to be about money and how many new cable subscribers the Big Ten Network can get, and that's I mean, as long as we look at it from that point, I'll be able to live with it better. That's just me, though.
Yeah, Notre Dame made their bed with the ACC, so that's off the table. Texas, I still think, people out there reporting that the Big Ten or reporting that the Longhorn Network has been a failure. Obviously, they have been in terms of their cable negotiations, but I'm pretty sure that money was guaranteed up front, 30 years, $30 million. So, Clay Travis is out here writing shock pieces to try and get cheap page views, saying that the Longhorn Network is a failure and ESPN's considering pulling the plug. I'm pretty sure if ESPN does, they have to compensate Texas. So Texas is doing just fine. Until Texas is sitting in a situation where they no longer have that network, they're not out in play. And like you mentioned, Oklahoma just academically and culturally wouldn't mesh. I think Austin would be fine, even though it's further away. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's going to be more and more. I mean, Missouri and Texas A&M aren't splashy additions. So A&M was supposed to not be good at football, and Kevin Sumlin has come in and done an incredible job. Who's to say that Kyle Flood won't do the same?
Yeah, I think that's actually what could potentially be the big get here, rather than the Maryland and Rutgers football programs, but the fact that all of this new money coming in is going to be able to really help kind of our lower to mid-tier programs, the Purdues, the Minnesotas, the Iowas, not only flesh out their own balance sheets, but then potentially have the resources to be able to go out and get a big-name coach, or to be able to retain an up-and-coming coordinator, or be able to spend the money that they need to recruit outside of their geographic footprints.
I hear Iowa has a coach they're paying $4 million a year who barely wins 7 games a year.
That's the rumor.
He's the highest paid public employee in Iowa, and he has been for like the last 3 years. He makes, I think, like $1.5 million more than the president of the school or something like that.
And
that's just sound investment.
His buyout is the length of his contract. If they want to buy him out, they have to pay the entirety of his contract. I mean, it's a great contract for Ferentz, terrible contract for Iowa.
It's like the Mets with Bobby Bonilla.
Paying him 25 years from now. Yeah, I think that it begins and ends with him. The NFL was flirting with him every single year, and it was like a Charlie Weiss, zero-sum game where somebody was going to get wealthy from somebody, and it was probably going to be that individual. It wasn't going to be the school benefiting, or if the pro team had hired Charlie Weiss, or a pro team had hired, Kirk Ferentz, how well would they really be doing? I remember when Pat Hill was getting, flirtatious overtures, I should say, from NFL teams, and now he's, I think, a quarterbacks coach or like a line coach for the Falcons. So
he's like a handlebar mustache model these days.
Yeah, probably. Nonetheless, I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think, and the really, I guess, long-term interesting thing about this from like a sports business perspective, sports economics, is that we won't really be able to evaluate this on or off the field for probably like 10 to 15 years, and that's still pretty short-term as far as these things go. Maryland's president kept making this point about how we're setting ourselves up for success for like 50 to 100 years, and like it sounds like hyperbole, but given how much money these big-time college sports pull in, it might not be.
Well, this is just a fun thing to think about, is that how much longer are we going to actually have cable television be relevant, considering everything is moving to the cloud or everything is moving to streaming. ESPN just put all their content on Xbox, for the love of everything, and it's fantastic. But how much longer are we even going to have a cable network? So if they want all that money, and if they're going to bank on cable subscriptions for all that money, there's a good chance that in the age we're in right now, all of that dries up in the next 5, 10, 15 years when we're about to start judging the actual impact of this move.
Yeah, I think that's also where it gets pretty interesting, because I think it was Britt Kerwin, who actually used to be Ohio State's president, was the guy that said people aren't going into the stands anymore, they're going to clicks, they're going to touches, like saying that students and alumni are watching games on their iPads, their Kindle Fires, they're not necessarily watching games in person. Why spend $150 when you can spend $150, get a touch device, and watch all the games, right? All you need is a cable subscription. Where it gets interesting is that there might not be a cable provider per se. And I think a la carte's still a ways away, but these mega media companies like Comcast and Time Warner that own a bunch of networks, own a bunch of pieces of the pie. Fox has big investments in the Big Ten network. I think what we could see happen is that those kind of branch off into these subscription-based models where maybe Xbox Live is no longer $50 a year, maybe it's $50 a month or $75 a month. You're basically getting all your media through like an Xbox 720 or like a PlayStation 4 or something.
That's actually what I do now. Like there's not a TV in my apartment. I have a projector over there plugged into my Xbox, and I run just about everything through there and whatever I can stream from Xfinity.
There you go. Future is now. Cut the cord, people.
Yep.
Check out theverge.com for TV.
Okay.
And we're back.
I got a real quick question. Do you guys think, and I've seen this kind of internet rumor mongering, do you think this is this ACC grab with Maryland is a shot across the bow to Notre Dame to eventually get them into the fold? Because I heard Mike Krzyzewski was quoted as saying, with no revenue equal revenue sharing in the ACC, that this really destabilizes the conference and opens up more schools to leave to other conferences, and he's really uncertain of the ACC's future.
Well, he should be uncertain because he's the basketball coach at a football program that is Duke. So the whole Duke's doing this year, like
bowl-eligible Duke.
Bowl-eligible Duke.
I was reading. I think it was on one of Pete's ML. He's done some really great stuff for SI in terms of interviewing Delaney and like just talking about the numbers and stuff like that. I think he was the guy that talked about how Maryland would earn $47 million or whatever. But he had this great point today that the best 6 or 7 basketball programs in the country, you could be talking about like Duke, Connecticut, even Michigan State, like put them all in one pool and put them on one network. The numbers they would do would be like the Liberty Bowl. So it's just a different game. And so, Coach K is right to worry because he has no leverage whatsoever. Duke just doesn't have that. All their academic clout in the world, and the Cameron Crazies aren't going to sell them TV rights deals. So I think I didn't actually think about that, but that makes a lot of sense. If they do kind of destabilize the ACC, especially we saw in the Big 12 until they went to revenue sharing that was like quasi-equal. I think they can obviously undermine that by having Texas and their like third-tier media rights crap that kind of like makes it disproportionate in favor of Texas and Oklahoma and whatnot. But until they went to a more equal revenue sharing, we saw how unstable that conference was the last 2 years.
Just remember, though, if the ACC is going to come back, they're going to do it on the shoulders of the University of Cincinnati.
Yeah, Connecticut, Louisville,
I could do a hate week on UC, but
yeah, I think
I'll let that go.
Anyone that's ever been to Cincinnati could probably.
Yeah,
I'm kidding, Cincinnati.
I'll sign up.
Listeners, readers. No, I love Cincinnati,
I'm not.
Hey, it's fun.
You're in Kentucky and you know it.
No, it's fun to hate regardless. But so I think we've kind of fleshed out plenty of our opinions on where this whole expansion thing is at. Kind of a general consensus that it's kind of a wait and see thing. A net benefit, at least financially. Ohio State doesn't need the money so much, but if it helps the league as a whole, 14 isn't totally an uncomfortable number, but it's probably a slippery slope. Nonetheless, let's get to the real meat and potatoes of this thing. Michigan week, hate week, rivalry week, the game, whatever you want to call it. There's tons to talk about in that regard. I guess first and foremost, what have you guys been hearing and reading about Denard Robinson? Is he going to go? Is he going to play running back? Is he going to play receiver? Is he going to play quarterback? I believe I read that Hope said that he's throwing it around just fine. I'll believe that when I see it.
Well, if there's one thing we've learned on the site so far the first 2 days of Hate Week, it's that what Brady Hoke says and what he does, I don't think it's possible to know what that guy's thinking about other than, the line at CC's. But other than that, what's he going to do? They were talking about it on TV during the Michigan-Iowa game that this is a huge wrinkle, and someone on Twitter said, I think it was the Big Ten guys at ESPN said, Denard being at running back is just a wrinkle that Ohio State's going to have to look forward to. It might be, sure, but,
Wasn't he already a running back? I mean...
He was last week.
Exactly.
No, I'm just saying,
the
guy he's not a prolific passer by any means. The threat of him throwing is... It's not causing, any of the defensive brain trust of Luke Fickell and Everett Withers to lose sleep.
No, I can't think it wouldn't. I don't think the passing would either. I mean, they've thrown in this year, I think I read the stat was like 16 interceptions against 17 touchdowns in the air, I believe the stat is. And they had 7 touchdowns last week, or in the last 2 weeks, through the air to get that number up to where it was. I think we tweeted that, actually. That might be a land-grant exclusive. But either way, this is what we're trying to worry about here. And I think the defensive coordinators, they haven't done a very good job against a spread-type offense like that. But even if Gardner's in there, we're still going to see kind of a pro-style set throwing the ball. And if Denard's in the backfield, then they're going to be running. But I think the linebacking core where it is right now is set up perfectly to defend that.
I think we're going to have to expect to see Robinson in the running, whether he's under center or in the backfield. Just because, Saints got destroyed last week, so I figure that they're going to run the ball at all. They're going to have to use Robinson in some capacity. He's their biggest athlete.
Who is the running back now with Fitz out?
Denard.
Okay.
It's Denard.
Yeah, I think that's probably an accurate assessment of the situation. Where's Devin Gardner? When you think of Devin Gardner, besides 4-star quarterback that was playing wide receiver, what do you think of? Are you worried about Devin Gardner as a quarterback? Does he actually make Michigan better?
I actually think he does. You look at Devin Gardner, and he seems to be a much more polished passer in just the 2 games he's played than Denard Robinson has. He's not as athletic, when he runs the ball, but I think he can hurt Ohio State more as a traditional quarterback than Denard Robinson can, and he can still run the ball. Now, now you're going to have to play that off with the fact that Fitz Toussaint is going to be out, and the Buckeyes are going to be able to key on Devin Gardner or whoever, Denard or whoever it's going to be. But that kind of worries me more than if it was just Denard and playing quarterback.
Well, with Devin Gardner, too, his first 2 games were against Minnesota and Iowa, which the Buckeyes are going to give him a little higher test than them 2 did. And then also it's in the shoe, too. That crowd's going to be rocking. So hopefully we can rattle them and, force them into some mistakes, be just like Denard's back there playing quarterback.
Well, you got to remember, I mean, that's all well and good about Denard, but what did he do last year? $170 on the ground and 2 scores, and he threw for 3 more. So, and that was a different defense, though. I think that's going to be the big thing, is going to be what this defense does, especially with the way the linebackers are now going to be ready to play. The secondary, other than Travis Howard not knowing how to not fall down while he's covering somebody, I think the secondary has been hit or miss, but when they've been a hit, they've been a very, very big hit. And they will take that ball and they will run with it, and they'll get turnovers and interceptions like they have been doing all year. They'll give up yards, but they do play well and have to.
You mentioned the linebackers kind of playing a critical role in your mind, especially with respect to Denard. But I think, honestly, the secondary is kind of finding their stride at just the right time. I think for all the the stats and the hyperbole about how terrible they were, and I've been leading that bandwagon since last offseason, saying that the secondary was just overrated and not as good as people think. But Bradley Roby is the real deal. And for all Christian Bryant's frustrations and just how short of a temper the guy seems to have, he's playing good ball right now. And C.J. Barnett has his best game of the year. Urban Meyer specifically mentioned it in his press conference this Monday. So I think that if those 2 guys continue to play at the same caliber they did against Wisconsin, if Travis Howard, as you mentioned, doesn't fall down, Howard is such a hit or miss streaky player, but he's still very physically talented and gifted. And I'm not even worried about Michigan's passing game so much. It's just, I think just having those guys serve as effective, especially the safeties, and their role against the run, and just how they can kind of move up and almost play more like a star type position, which was Christian Bryant's kind of more natural position. I think that Christian Bryant could make or break this game very easily.
I think you got to look at the offense if we can switch gears real quick. We are talking a lot about how the defense is going to play a big role, and it is. But the offense that we saw against Wisconsin, and I watched that game twice already. I watched it once and I watched it the next day, and I don't understand. A lot of it was just Braxton Miller trying to be X-Brax 360, and we all love that, and we all want to see it. But how many times did he drop back when he should have thrown the ball away instead of running around for 10 seconds and taking a 5-yard loss, or running around for 10 seconds and taking a 5-yard loss, and keep doing that the entire game? I think actually, you know what? I'm going to take that back. I don't know what to think about what the offense is. I know they've been great against Nebraska. They were firing on all cylinders against Indiana, but I'm wondering if this is going to be any kind of a setback for them.
You guys, your thoughts? I thought Braxton looked kind of anxious, and it was maybe his worst game, and at least since his freshman season. Any thoughts on the offense being a potential worry spot?
Yeah, that's my big concern as well. Whether it was a combination of Miller not making the right reads, the play calling being a little bit iffy, you felt like Hyde really kind of had the hot hand. He only got 13 carries, and I think really could have done some more damage to offset the fact that we were getting Atari Miller instead of X-Brax Miller. I've been a little bit worried consistency-wise most of the season, since it seems like it's kind of feast or famine. With Ohio State, I feel like I'm going to see 1 or 2 50-yard games. I'm going to see a bomb. I'm going to see Miller break 6 tackles and run for 40, and then I'm going to see 3 plays where we gain 2 yards and keep our defense out on the field for a long time. And that's concerning. If our offense plays and calls the game similar to how we did last week, it's going to be really tough for us to win.
Michigan's defense, their interior line is not very good. I don't think. They're okay, but I think if Ohio State sticks to running Carlos Hyde between the tackles, it's going to open it up for Braxton Miller. Michigan's defense is not very good on the perimeter against athletic quarterbacks, and that's exactly what Braxton Miller is, obviously. I think they'll be able to establish Braxton and both Carlos Hyde. It's going to force Michigan to play a lot more guys up in the box close to the line of scrimmage. And if Braxton can make some throws like he is very capable of doing, it's really going to open up the offense for the Buckeyes. I'm really not too concerned. Wisconsin was a tough game and a tough environment last week, and Carlos Hyde ran the ball well. Just for whatever reason, Tom Herman didn't stick to that game plan when it seemed to be working. I think we're going to see a little bit different game plan this week, and it's going to work out well for Ohio State.
Well, the one thing that really kind of bugged me about the game was how many times did we see anyone on the offense try to go downfield? I think they only tried 1 or 2 passes over 20 yards, and one was a bomb that Brax tried to hit Evan Spencer in the end zone to try to put a little bit more distance, and he overthrew him by about 5 yards. They really didn't have a chance. So that Wisconsin secondary, I'd love to see the all-22 in that game, because that Wisconsin secondary must have been playing out of their minds covering everybody in that game.
I can definitely see that. I was actually going to point out Michigan's pass defense is ranked number 1 in the country in terms of against passing yards, but also if you look at the teams that they've played, they haven't played any particularly prolific passing teams. I think that at the end of the day, Braxton Miller will be able to do what he needs to do. If Greg Madison, I think, is going to probably put together a good game plan, but Braxton ran all over him last year. It's a year better, a year older Michigan defense, but I'm not losing any sleep over it. I guess we've kind of hit all different angles in terms of the game. Let's kind of wind things down here with a simple exercise. We're going to call this Who You Hate. There's got to be a Michigan player that you hate more than the rest. Maybe some of these are more obvious.
Man.
I'm going to lead off with a Michigan player that I hate for a very simple reason, because I think this guy overachieves. He's not as good as his reputation makes it out to be. He works really, really hard, and he's not a physical freak, but for his size, he plays way above his head, and that's Jordan Kovacs. I think that guy, he mounts up a ton of tackles. He's just a super hustle guy. If he was on Ohio State, he'd be like Tyler Moeller before his injury, I guess. But he's like a better, more evolved Tyler Moeller, and he reminds me of like the scrappy guy on the basketball team, maybe like a less good Aaron Craft. If he's on your team, you hate him. Basically, I'll go ahead and make Kovacs my guy.
I hate Roy Roundtree.
Particular reasons?
Yeah.
Well, I don't trust anybody who's from Ohio and goes to Michigan,
Okay.
and I can't stand watching him. And I feel like if I was a Michigan fan, I'd hate him too, because he's somebody who I think is extremely talented and will vary between these really frustrating bouts of inconsistency. If they're going to target him 10 times, I could see him catching it 9 times. I could see him dropping it 6. And then just making everybody tear their hair out. He's frustrating. I don't know if he's going to kill me or hand the game to me on a silver platter. I'll be glad when he's done.
Does it have to be? Is it current Wolverines that you're talking about?
Let's make it current, just for the sake of argument.
All right, give me a minute.
Search your brain. Think deep and true. There's plenty of guys to hate. Throw him out there. Denard Robinson. I guess you can't really hate Fitz Toussaint since he's facing 10 to 12 months of intense rehab. That'd be really brutal. That guy's injury was just horrific. Like, it made you want to throw up and your heart drop into your chest no matter how you feel about Michigan.
Just for what it's worth, he did just say that you can't hate a Michigan player, Luke. So
you know what I mean.
Ooh.
Hate comes in different kinds, all different kinds of quantifiable. There's some subtext to hate.
For me, it's not a player. Ever since they hired him and all the hubbub, I haven't been able to stand Brady Hoke. And I'll tell you what, it's the Ohio thing. It just makes me want to scream. And the funny thing, if you watch any videos that like MGO blog or Maize and Brew post about Michigan and about when they're playing Ohio State, you can see that they're all tagged in that top corner. They're all tagged Ohio versus Michigan. So all these fans are starting to actually drink that disgusting sugar-filled Kool-Aid that Brady Hoke's been drinking and all of that. And it is just, it makes me want to scream out loud. I can't stand that Ohio thing. And also, he reminds me way too much of either Chris Christie or Matt Foley, the Chris Farley character in SNL. Can't stand him. I'm never going to like the guy. I'm never going to respect him either. I hate Brady Hoke.
Brady Hoke's Kool-Aid is actually pizza sauce. It's disgusting.
Pizza sauce from Dave Brandon.
Yeah.
It's a match made in heaven.
I'm going to go with Denard Robinson. The guy has won the September Heisman for the last 4 years. He is a level of hyperbole not seen since the yellow journalism days back in the turn of the 20th century with Remember the Maine. He's an okay player. He's going to make a great free safety in the NFL, but he's not. I can't. I hate the smile. I hate the aw shucks me interview stuff. I can't stand him. And I'm glad he's going to go 1-3 in his Michigan career. The fact that he won last year gets in my neck so bad that I feel like I got to put on one of those brace things. The guy irritates. The guy irritates me, and I'm never going to like him.
Brett,
He's like
Brett,
modern-day Desmond Howard for me.
Absolutely. Brett, take us home.
Yeah, I got to agree with Ted on that one. I mean, out of everybody, I probably hate Denard the most because he's the face you always see. He can't tie his shoelaces, and you always see him, at the basketball games, having a good time, which I could understand for a college kid, but I just don't want to see him getting camera time at college basketball games. But it's pretty stupid reasons, but I don't really.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I know.
It's all about irrational, unjustifiable hate. No Kyle Kalos haters out here. Or what about the I guess he's not on Michigan.
What about the guy that slid across the hood of the car, like Dukes of Hazzard style? I can't remember his name, but I don't really think a man of his size should have even thought that he could have executed that move.
I'm going to reserve my hate on Kyle Kalis until he actually does something against Ohio State. Let's see what happens on Saturday.
Didn't he promise or guarantee to go 4-0 or something like that?
I think he said something about how he was going to. It was like wipe the smile off. It was some kind of thing that I guess sounded really funny to a kid who's 17 years old or however old he is, and that's all well and good. But we're old people here, so.
Fair enough. So one last thing before we wrap this episode of Hangout in the Holy Land up. Let's go ahead and talk about our predictions for the game. I'll go ahead and lead things off. I talked to SB Nation's Michigan representatives, Mason Brew, Zach Travis, their editor, and we were exchanging some notes today, and I said that I thought that Ohio State would win 28-17. Sticking with that, that's kind of what I'm probably going to go with on our prediction when I write that up Thursday night. What do you guys think? We'll go ahead and just start from left to right. Brett, who do you have winning this game, and what's the score?
I got Ohio State winning the game. I don't think it's going to be as close as the 4.5-point spread. I thought that was going to be a little bit more. It sounded like we all did when we were talking earlier. And, I mean, I don't really see this being less than a 10-point game. I was thinking maybe something along the lines of 31-20, something like that, in that area. I think that Braxton will be able to find holes, unlike against Wisconsin, and that defense really is going to shut down Michigan, without having Toussaint, maybe Denard at running back. I just not impressed by that. I think our defensive line will be able to, stop the run, allow linebackers to be like Shazier to be making plays in there.
Chris?
So this game to me feels a lot like the Nebraska game, except that instead of having a quarterback and a running back, now you have a wide receiver and a quarterback that's playing running back, running the whole show. But I really like what I saw in the first quarter against Wisconsin for Ohio State. I thought they played up-tempo, and I thought they did some things that we hadn't seen them do on that first drive. They've been horrible on their first drive this year, but they were a little bit more up-tempo. I think that's why they're going to open the game for sure. There's no – Woody Hayes always said you can get up for about 3 or 4 games a year. The rest you really got to struggle through. There is no problem getting up for this being the bowl game and a potential look at whatever might happen in the AP after this. No one's going to need help getting up for this game. Ohio State's going to be ready to play, and it's going to look like a lot like Nebraska. They're going to win 35-21, and I don't think it's going to be that close, and the 21st point for Michigan is going to be scored in garbage time when the seniors are all off the field.
I feel like it's going to be a little bit closer than that. I still like Ohio State to win somewhere in the neighborhood of 30-24, and maybe getting that late score. But in these kind of games, I feel that the cliche is that you can throw the records out, and that they use that cliche because it's born out of truth. Even if there's personnel mismatches, the adrenaline coming up here. This is if you can't get up for this game, then you should go back to playing Xbox. You have no business playing college football. The things that we saw with the Wisconsin game, I think last week with the offensive struggles will eventually go away. OSU might come out of the gate a little bit slow, make the adjustments, figure out Michigan's defense, and then Miller will come around for a big touchdown run to steal a win.
All right, now go ahead and wrap us up, Ted.
I'm going 43-21 Ohio State. I really like the way the linebacking core has come into shape for Ohio State. Zach Bourne, I think Urban Meyer's being a little bit dramatic when he said it's been one of the greatest stories in Ohio State history. It's been a very good story that a fullback in mid-season on a very good team can move right into the starting position as a linebacker on the opposite side of the ball. but he really helped shore up that unit. And now Etienne Sabino is going to be back. Ryan Shazier is a beast. I mean, that linebacking core is much better than they were at the beginning of the season. I really like Ohio State's offensive line against Michigan's defensive line, and I like the fact that Braxton Miller can make plays when he wasn't able to last week. And I say 43 because I really want, at the end of the game, when the game's decided and out of reach, for Urban to go for 2, and then in the post game they'll say, "Why did you go for 2?" And he said, I want him to look right in the camera and say, "Because I couldn't go for 3." And then we can build a statue of Urban right outside the rotunda of Ohio Stadium, and we can worship him for the next 20 years. Because that's the greatest thing that could ever happen to most of us.
I'm with you.
Urban Meyer saying because I couldn't go for 7 or something like that. Go for 20. But yeah, no, I love it. We covered all bases from 6 points to a 22-point victory. So as long as Ohio State doesn't lose, which, knock on wood, I think we've got our bases covered. Nonetheless, another successful episode of Hangout in the Holy Land. This time we'll go from right to left. I'm Luke Zimmermann, joined by Ted Glover, Matt Brown, Chris Kopech, and former Ohio State quarterback Joe Boserman, a.k.a. Bealey17, Brett Ludwiczak. Follow him on Twitter, you guys. Anyway, go Buckeyes, beat Michigan. We're out.